do appreciate the turnout. This is amazing for the Utilities Committee, as far as I've seen. I have been saying since January that my opinion is separating is not a good idea, but it's not my decision. Thank you. So I wanted to give council some ideas, thoughts on what you're gonna have to face with. Now, what I've read is that some of the opposition to separating has to do with duplicating effort. My point is, you don't have to duplicate effort. And if you'll look, when I go through these assumptions, I'm gonna touch on that. You do not have to duplicate effort to do this. So here are the assumptions that I used. That all the utility staff and employees will report to the utility superintendent, not the city manager. That all non-utility enterprise funds go to the general government, to the general fund. That would include sanitation and other, airport. All of those are general government funds. Those are not utility funds. So I've used that as an assumption. That the utilities and the general government will share finance, HR, the city clerk, all the insurance coverages, IT, building maintenance, purchasing, economic business development, marketing, warehouse, fleet, all the internal services will be shared by the general government and by utilities. Utilities and the general government will use the same pay plan, same salary structure, use the same benefits package, and the same personnel policies. So those are the assumptions that I made to work on this list of issues and potential conflicts. And you'll notice there is no separation as far as duplication of HR, of like IT, the way it was at one time. I think 25 years ago it was that way.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, human resources was the first centralized in the two areas.
That does not mean that you're not gonna face conflicts, because promise me, you will face conflicts. So the first thing that I put on my list was the priorities. The priorities of utilities, the priorities of the general government. That could be from anything from hanging Christmas lights, because that's not a utility priority, but the electric department does it now, to transfers to the general fund. Right now, transfers to the general fund, primarily from electric, are why you don't have property taxes. And that will be a point of contention. It may not be initially, but trust me, it will be a point of contention. The budget, we're gonna have two sets of budgets. So who has authority over the utilities budget? Who recommends that budget to city council? What role does the city manager play? What role does the finance department play? That includes rates, fees, charges. Again, who determines the utility rates? Who's gonna recommend to council to raise rates, to raise fees, to change rates, revise rates? Who's gonna do that? Transfers, again, will be a huge issue. And there's gonna have to be a balance between the needs of the general government, and the general government balance its budget to continue to offer an acceptable level of service, public safety, recreation, whatever, all of those things. Versus the pressure to increase transfers, as there will be inevitably from the utilities. But there always will be an increase, pressure to increase. And if you'll look at that, and I've got the information if y'all wanna look at it, the transfers have gone up considerably. Not just since 2012, when property taxes were absorbed into utility rates. They've gone up even since then, the transfers to the general fund. So again, you've got that balance. If I'm a utilities guy, I'm gonna be arguing against increasing those transfers. Because if I have to increase transfers, where's that money coming from? It's either coming through rate increases or me cutting expenditures. Reserves. This may not seem like a big issue to y'all, but what is an acceptable, proper level of utility reserves? If you look in the code, their requirements for electric, water, wastewater, and gas on levels of reserves to put aside. All right, we are transferring more, we're putting more into reserves than the code requires. If I'm the utility superintendent and I need to put money back into the system, that's one place I'm gonna look to get it. If I'm required to put these monies into reserves and I'm putting more, then I'm gonna say, okay, I need to get this money back in. I need to do more tree trimming. I need to rebuild my system, things like that. So you're gonna have to deal. And what I'm saying here is the city council is gonna wind up being a referee. I don't care what kind of folks you hire. You might hire the best people in the world, the most agreeable people in the world. There will be conflict. The investments, again, is that purely a finance department, city manager decision? What role does the utilities superintendent have on investments? What if that person says, no, I don't wanna put my money over here, I wanna put it over here? So again, all of these have to be decided. Allocation of internal cost. The logical extreme of that is, if I feel like, let me just take fleet. If I feel like I'm not getting the level of service from the city's fleet, does that mean I as utilities can go out and contract that out somewhere? But not just that, IT, any number of what I consider internal functions that you're paying for. And then there's the allocation. Even if you're getting a good level of service, then you've got the allocation of it. Am I paying more? Even if the service is good, am I paying more for this service than I could get on the free market? And as a utilities person, am I not obligated, am I not compelled to find that best bang for the buck? Again, you're gonna wind up being the referee. Customer care. 75% is the estimate that I've received of what customer care does is directly related to utilities. It's in the general government. So if I'm the utility superintendent, you're gonna tell me that my billing, my collections, my meter readers, and all the things that control my revenue stream aren't under my control. They're under the city government. Again, I'd have a problem with that. And you're gonna have to reconcile these council. The same thing applies to business, economic business development. If you look at, we're gonna talk about this later, if you look at Vogel coming online at some point in time, 20 years, you're gonna have more capacity than we could currently use. So I'm gonna say, from utilities, I want the big bang for the buck. I want big industry. I want that load so I can sell that energy instead of eat it, which a number of cities have had excess for years and years through MEAG, and they're buying more than they use. And that is not a good situation. And we have times where we're like that too. Now, we have some off-system sales. Chris knows a lot more about those than I do. Where we are selling some of that energy off-system, but those contracts expire. So again, that whole marketing, business development and so forth, and then the pay scale. If I am Bruce and I'm competing with Georgia Power for linemen, or I'm competing with Mitchell EMC for linemen, and I realize, and I've got the scale here on the range, that starting pay for a lineman is so much higher than our starting pay for a lineman, then I'd have a problem with it. Because I'm competing with these folks, I'm competing with these other utilities. So again, if we're trying to use the same pay scale, and that's the problem with cities, pigeonhole these positions so that a line worker is equivalent to some other general government position, which frankly, there's probably not a lot of competition for that position, but there is a lot of competition for a lineman. And lineman is the heart and soul of what keeps the system going. And I have fought this for 40 years, right, Bruce? Absolutely. And so, you know, that's something you've got to consider. And as a utility superintendent, you can bet I would be fighting for that. So that's a high level, very high level. It is not an all-inclusive list. I will guarantee you, you're gonna have other issues that you're gonna wind up being the referee if you do go through this separate.
Let me make one comment to the last thing that you said. I understand what you're saying. I don't necessarily, I don't agree that we'd necessarily compete with Georgia Power. We would to a small degree, but I would venture a guess that someone who wants to go on to something that may be a little bit more lucrative, they would be looking at the very real possibility of relocating. And so you gotta compare a family here, and I'm looking at, I think we more compete with local companies more so than we do with Georgia Power. It's not to say that we don't, as in law enforcement. If you left the GBI or Thomasville PD, you would necessarily make more money either with State Patrol or the GBI, or go one step better with the feds, but you're gonna have to relocate.
I have lost 8 or 9 people over the years, at least, me personally.
Over the years.
To Georgia Power.
Over the years.
Mhm.
Okay. It's gonna
And
happen.
Griffin-
It's going to happen. I'm not saying it's a non-issue. I'm just saying it's not a direct competition.
Well, I disagree with that. It is.
We've lost people to Apple.
We've lost.
Yeah.
And
Bruce,
how
Craig,
many
Lima, did we lose last year?
I would be willing to say in the last 6 years, we've lost 2 to Georgia Power, and we've lost 4 to Talcott EMC.
In the last how long?
6 years.
Okay.
But last year, we lost,
Do you think that's acceptable then?
Over-
Because you
over-
train these
over-
people.
Over the last 6 years, it's gonna happen. It happens in my pawn shop. It happens in every business. It happens in law enforcement.
You spend a lot of money training a line worker, trust me. You
And I
spend a
agree.
lot,
I
and it's a
agree.
3-year
I agree.
training program.
You're not gonna create a perfect world, is what I'm saying.
No, no, and I'm not trying to compete with Georgia Power either.
Well, and here's what you're suggesting is going from, starting, I guess, a starting
I'm not
salary of.
suggesting anything.
No, he was just showing.
I'm just showing you.
He
Yeah,
was just showing.
from $22 to $36.
Just
Yeah,
showing
that's
the
a
fact.
75% increase.
It is, that's just the fact.
Well, that's
It's
gonna
up to
exist.
y'all to decide.
That's gonna exist either way, doesn't matter.
Oh, I
City
know
manager
it
in
does.
charge of everything,
Yeah.
that's an issue that's gonna exist because it's been talked about over the years.
My point is, if I'm utilities separate from the city with my own issues of having to pay competitively, then I'm gonna push that.
Sure you
That's
push
all.
for it. Sure you do.
Keith, if there's what, 52 electric cities in Georgia?
Yes.
How many of those cities have separated their utility superintendent from their city manager?
In the same manner we described.
That don't report, the utility superintendent does not report to the city manager. How many of those cities are there?
Fitzgerald, Noonan, 4, Dalton, Marietta,
It might
no,
be-
Marietta reports.
It might be 5, I know it's 4.
Yeah.
How many?
Four, either
52.
5 out of 52.
4 or 5 out of 52.
So I have a question, so did they all have, were they, I mean, you say 4 or 5 out of 52? They've all been electric cities for a long time,
Mhm.
correct? Did they have the structure like we had before, where you had 2 people, going to city council, and then they moved to the structure that exists
No,
now?
No, they set that up
Oh,
here,
yeah.
when they first started into the business, in the summer of 1999. And they set up a separate commission at that time and have existed. Now, most of the cities, that I can think of several, Calhoun, Monroe, who had a separate commission and consolidated over the last 5 years.
So that's my
6 years.
question, what is the best practice? Is the best practice to consolidate, or is the best practice to separate? I mean, what you're seeing, the trend in others, do you understand my
Oh, yeah,
question?
The trend has definitely been to consolidate, yeah, in this state.
You don't
sure.
see people trying to do what we're doing here.
I
Keith,
think what
I'm
Keith's
So
saying
we're
is
going backwards.
that we
Yeah.
have,
Yes.
no, they have a utility superintendent, but he reports to the city manager.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But it's not a consolidated job. The city
No, no,
manager
I-
is
no,
not
I
the
understand
utility
that.
superintendent.
and that's fine.
They still have a
Nobody
utility
argues that.
superintendent, but he reports to the city manager.
Right.
And
All
those
4 of
city
those
have the-
report to the city manager, or they're separate in the state? Those 4
Those
are
four
separate in the
completely
state?
separate, and
Okay.
report to a separate commission or
Are you familiar with their financial transfers for their success in doing so? None of those are on the list I know of that don't charge property taxes, so, I mean, that's an advantage we have today, because of that consolidation and a lot of other things we've done.
Those who are truly independent, and I'm
Yeah.
not counting Marietta in that, because all board actions have to have council approval.
Okay, so they don't transfer back to the general government at all?
They do,
Okay,
but it's not nearly as
Not nearly as sufficient.
what you're accustomed to now.
yeah.
And those other cities don't have and it's unique as Thomasville.
Right.
We have a lot of enterprises that those other cities do not have.
Yeah,
That's a lot for one person to have to be in control. And you're talking about the transfers, city manager always transferred, remember approving the transfer. Transfers were just done.
I'd recommend a policy.
Well,
I'm sure it should
you know, we
be,
do
but I
approve, we
blame
do
the-
approve it when we approve the
It's
budget.
in the budget.
When we
Right,
approve the
when
budget,
you
we
approve the budget, but
Other than that,
if
yeah.
you listen to what the charter says, if you read the charter, those transfers should be made when the transfers are being done.
Yeah, when was the charter written? Originally? The last big
58.
revisions in the seventies and the eighties.
But
Is
I'm
what
not-
we're doing not working? Is it not working what we're doing already?
We have some serious issues.
What are they?
What are they?
Giving too
I'll
much
name
power
one.
to one person.
I'll make one.
And I've
December
talked to several
27th.
lawyers that represent other cities that said that we have allowed one person to have too much power.
Who is the we? The council?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so why don't y'all do something about it?
Well, that's what
Not-
we're trying
not
to discuss.
divide it.
That's what we having discussion about.
Mm.
I'm not sure I understand how the vestment of power in one individual manifests itself into problems. Could you be more specific? Given that someone has too much power, how does that affect
When
how
one person,
things
when a
operate?
city manager knows that our 5-member board, when a city manager knows that all he has to do is satisfy 3 council members, he uses it to his advantage. And I can speak clearly to that, cause I've been on this board for 8.5 years.
I think I'm like Keith, I think that we need to set a policy that we have to approve transfers. That, you know, at least need to know when those transfers are taking place.
Todd, I would absolutely agree with that, and if it becomes cumbersome, then you set a number on it, and I don't know what the number is, maybe it's 5,000, maybe it's 10,000, below that, maybe, until you see signs of abuse. But I can't imagine a substantial transfer going to utility company to any department without the council okay. I just can't imagine that.
Always in the budget.
It's
Flowers
Okay, so in
It's
effect,
included in the budget
Yeah, we
presentation.
approved it in the budget.
Okay, that wasn't clear.
And when we reviewed the budget, we reviewed every bit of that, and then we reviewed all the stuff we looked at earlier.
Okay.
And all those projections, all that's part of what we did back in.
So that's not a problem, okay?
It's not, I don't think it's a problem at all, and I think quite frankly, the third time you have to approve it, you're gonna say, why are we doing this? Because it's what we do as a matter of course. The question that was posed to Greg, and Greg gave a fairly generic answer, I'd like a little more specific, and either, any of y'all can answer it. When we have a separate superintendent of utilities and a separate city manager, I understand you had issues with the prior arrangement, but we have 2 distinct individuals that have their own responsibilities. And that the superintendent of utilities reports through the city manager. There's still, we have these meetings twice a month, we still know everything's going on, he asks every question you wanna ask. We are the utilities committee currently, although there's some question about the makeup of that. Why is that a negative that the CEO of the enterprise would also have ultimate, view and control, if you will, over the primary revenue source for the enterprise? Why is that a negative? Because that's what happens everywhere else in the world in general business, that would be.
Are you referring to private or government?
In
You
government,
said CEO.
yeah.
Well, we
Okay,
don't
the
have a
city
CEO.
manager's the CEO.
No, it's not,
And
it's
the
the chief operating officer, not a chief executive officer.
Okay, so he's the chief operating officer.
Okay.
I apologize if my analogy.
No, that's what, I'm just saying what's in the
But,
charter.
Okay, the man in charge is the city manager.
Or one.
It used to be, but we know quite frankly, it's always the woman who's in charge, it just happens to be the man that's the face of the city. But the individual who's in charge is the city manager, and they have responsibility for all functions of the city. At the end of the day, they have to make sure that all these people over here are happy and do all they can to succeed within our community. That's our responsibility, is provide an environment where our citizens can succeed and thrive. That's the way I see it. So if you have the individual at the top, that's the boss, the overall responsible entity, why is it that his primary revenue resource would not report through him and go to the council? I wonder where the advantage is. Understand where you say it's a disadvantage to have one individual where we used to have where's the advantage of having it separate?
When you say his primary source of revenue, that's gonna be so separate or not, and it's not his primary source of revenue, it's for us to run the city of Thomasville. And I'm gonna go you one better, anybody that by virtue of having that much power has the, whatever you wanna call it, intestinal fortitude to write checks for almost $200,000 2 days after he walks out the door, that's too much power, that's not gonna happen again.
Well, we've already agreed on that, it's two individuals, you still.
We
have-
agreed coming out of that, workshop out of Merlewood, both groups were divided, the number one problem we combined from both groups was too much power in one set of hands. That was unanimous.
No, I didn't agree to that. I agreed that is a factor, but I
That
never
was
agreed to that.
unanimous on both charts,
Didn't
it was
agree to
number
it.
one.
I agreed it was a factor. I do
And it
agree.
was number one. We
And
did them in
that's fine.
sequence.
My thing is, we separated. You have a city manager, you have a utility superintendent. And that's up to the city council to do our job. I mean, we.
Give direction.
I mean, we have to give direction and transfers and all that. I mean, if we just letting it slide, then we're not doing our job.
That's
I
why,
mean-
that's why
I
you're
mean,
sitting here as a utility commission
exactly.
instead of a committee, because in the past, it was just two council members.
Right.
Now it's a committee, a commission like it's supposed to be, check and balance, that's all we try to
But
do.
that's not what the code says, Mayor.
I'm talking about what the charter says.
The code, and Tim can address this, the code says the utility commission will consist of two council members and the superintendent. And the way I read it, the superintendent would then have a vote on what goes before council. Now, Tim, I'm not a lawyer, so Tim, I just wanna point that out, because there's so much incompatible language in
Right.
the charter.
I agree.
And code, that needs to be addressed.
And you know, things that happened in 1958, I mean, it's kind of different in 2018. And we're looking at some of the things, and I know some of the stuff that our forefathers wrote for us and all that, but some of that stuff, as you read through it, you know, I think we might need to take a look at that.
It's just- Actually, they should've took a look at it when they did, that was the problem, they should've took a look at it back when they decided that one person would be over all.
Go ahead.
So I just.
Got one stand.
Oh, well, he pointed at me, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. So I just try to clarify the issue at hand. As I understand it, is there a consensus that there is to be a city manager and there is to be a superintendent? There's consensus on the council
roles
about
are
that,
separated, yeah.
that the roles are separated.
Mhm.
But now what the pinch point is how they will report to the city council.
Right.
Whether so it's on I mean, everyone agrees, y'all agree, there's consensus that there needs to be a superintendent.
Right.
We haven't had one in the past, that's why you were hired. So now,
Don Atkinson.
excuse me?
Don Atkinson really did run the utility.
Okay.
And then Jared Finessa succeeded him.
And Jerry's not succeeded him, but
Right.
Jerry's role was much less so in real supervision of that, quite frankly, Chris was running the department. But Don really did run the department for years, and Steve had the title, Don had the responsibility ultimately, if you go back to what we did before.
So today, what you are advocating for, Keith, as I understand it, is that you have the two roles, but the superintendent reports to the city manager.
I am not.
Okay, sorry.
I have expressed my opinion.
Okay.
Since January.
Sorry, right, okay.
I am not advocating either way, that is a council decision. All I'm advocating is council deal with these issues.
Mhm.
And my overall, here is the overall concern. This city, better than any other city that I've been around, worked for or been around, and I've been around them all for a long, long time, works together, better together as a team than any city in the state that I know of. My prevailing concern is, if you go to this level of separation, that's going to be, I don't know if it'll disappear, but it's certainly going to be affected. And that's my overriding concern.
It's
Let me just say,
regressive.
of all the things that you went through, there was about 21 by 1, I just don't see that anywhere in there if the council does their job, I just don't see it.
Not so much the council, each person. The superintendent of
that's what I'm
utilities
saying.
do his
Each
job, or
department
her
head
job,
will
and the
have-
manager do his or her job. I don't.
Sounds to me like y'all wanna micromanage.
Ma'am,
Yes.
I have a full-time job. I'm a builder.
Yeah, this
Well,
job
problems, you have to do
costs me
something.
money, or taken away from
Well,
my
I know, but
business.
y'all are micromanaging. Hire the right person and then you don't have to do it. Let them do it.
That's exactly what we intend to do.
Maybe you wanna say we trying to micromanage. I wouldn't say we micromanage. We don't
I don't know,
micromanage. Ms. McDonald, we
you're
don't
not, but you're
micromanage.
trying.
Keith or Chris.
Yeah, one understand.
My observation the last 2.5 months, coming to as many meetings as I can, sitting back observing, trying to just sort out what in the world's going on in this town. The perception of the community is that the city council is indeed micromanaging. What I'm hearing is, and maybe, I don't mean good, bad, right or wrong. One council member brings up the charter to his advantage. And then something's going on contrary to the charter, and we try to overlook what the charter says. I'm just suggesting, if the charter was written in 1958, maybe we need to go back and look at the charter. Because I'm telling you, some of you are using the charter to your advantage, and then other things, you're disregarding the charter. And I think the community needs to understand from the charter what the job of the city council is. Because our perspective is, you're indeed micromanaging. May not be right, but that's the perspective of the overwhelming majority of the community.
Let me share this with you. And I'm gonna be brief. There's a group of you here today and you're concerned about what's going on. We appreciate that. This gentleman, he might have changed his mind now, and that gentleman right here, when it was election time, what they ran on was what we're discussing now. And I only have one vote, so I can't tell these guys what to do. So if it happened, it happened. If it don't, it don't. I don't have anything personal.
With all due respect, sir, I didn't mention any of that, you did.
I-
I'm just
correct.
saying
I'm
with
just letting
respect.
you know.
Okay, we would appreciate when the city council members change their mind, looking at us, looking in the camera, and being a man and saying, I changed my mind. I've changed my mind on multiple issues in my life, multiple times. It's insulting to us when there's video evidence, written evidence, just say, I changed my mind. That's all we're asking. I changed my mind. So I didn't mention that, you did. I'm gonna sit down.
Are you referring to the video that I was in?
Multiple,
I've
sir.
explained it 3 times. If I misspoke, I
I've read it on the
misspoke. That's the
records.
long
It's
and the
not
short of it.
misspoke, sir.
In the charter,
Due
city
respect.
charter, what section do we choose to follow and what section do we choose not to follow as you described?
I'm
But
just.
specifically, what section do we choose not to follow?
I'm saying this, if the charter was written in 1958.
I don't think it was.
No, our culture's different in the last 50 years, we all recognize that. I'm saying from a citizen's appearance, it sounds like almost all the city council are quoting the charter to their advantage according to what they're trying to get pushed forward. I think it might be wise to look at the whole charter and say, do we need to just go back and revamp the charter so there's clear lines of responsibility? So like, what the citizens believe is that the council members have an idea of what their job is, but the citizens may have a different idea. Like, there just has to be clear lines of communication. Y'all have the authority, I'm not refuting that. I'm just saying there's mass confusion amongst what the city council's roles and responsibilities are. And I'm just suggesting maybe we go back and look at the charter and just, if there's any lack of clarity, clear it up, change the charter, whatever you have to do legally.
And like Greg said, one of my things was separation of utilities and city manager. Now, I didn't run on who reports to who. I ran on separation of the two jobs. I had no idea that, we're gonna be in this battle on who reports who. Somebody's gotta have a boss. And it all boils down to transfer of money. That's what it all boils down to. You can sit here and fuss and go back and forth. It all boils down to okaying the transfer of money from the utilities to the general government and having that control.
Mr.
And that's-
Bass, do you agree
and
with
it's-
that?
And it's we should know what money's being transferred.
The
I
council
mean,
controls.
the council should know what money's being transferred. I mean,
And how much.
all of a sudden you look up and there's $3 million being transferred, for what? You would wanna know, as a community.
Well, every year in the budget process, and we'll do that, we'll go through this exercise here in a couple of months. Ashley and the rest of the team puts together the budget for council adoption. You'll see the transfer from every fund, water, gas, sewer, electric, CNS, all those funds that get transferred over to general government will be presented and for adoption.
And, you know, this is my first time doing it, so
Understand.
I'm gonna ask a
Yes,
question now,
sir.
'cause I wanna know
Yeah,
why certain money's being transferred.
And you'll
Always have
see,
to amend the budget for some reason or another, cause of transfer.
you'll see the transfer amounts and the balances left over from the net income and what amount's gonna go into reserves and all that.
Todd, why would you wanna take a step backwards to a position that the 4 remaining municipalities likely
No.
are trying to get away
No,
from?
those other 47 have a city manager and they have a utility superintendent.
And the utility superintendent.
Right, that's what I'm
reports to
saying,
the city
that's,
manager.
that's what I'm saying.
And the transfers are part of the budget. For you to say you don't know what they're for is a fallacy, because.
I mean, this is
you
my
have-
first time.
I understand, I
And
understand.
I'm learning about
But,
these
you know-
you saying we transferring this, and we transferring that, and we
Yeah,
got
well,
five
sure.
going up here, really?
Like we've heard before, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
You're not gonna do the budget until after this hash has been settled. Potentially.
I wanna say, and I know Judge, but I wanna say, I'm not saying the council is choosing to abide by this section and not by, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there is incompatible language between the charter and the municipal code. And I've sent several examples to Tim. And I don't know if Tim's still here, or if he even wants to weigh in on any of this. But there is just, I would describe it as incompatible language, right, Tim?
That is right. I mean, here's the bottom line. What you've got is a charter that was originally drafted in probably the mid-50s. It's been amended some since then, but you've got inconsistencies within the charter, and you've got some inconsistency between the charter and some of the code of ordinances. Keith pointed one out the other day that I wasn't aware of. So those issues are there, and whichever direction the council goes, you know, I would suggest that we at some point try to clean those up so that we've got as few inconsistencies within the charter itself and as the charter relates to the rest
And
of
I
the
expect some of Tim's monthly check.
And don't we, I mean, we're doing a what, an RFQ now for the UDO to redo those ordinance? Why can't we get a RFQ to look at our charter? Cause they do it all over the country now, to look at our charter and let's get that straight.
By we doing that, we'll do all at one time.
Have those, I mean,
All right, I got two quick things. One is on transfers. Let's ask Ashley, we get gross and net on these slides that we just looked at. Let's just get her to give us the numbers, the actual transfer numbers that we're getting on these charts for.
In addition to, or
Just, yeah, one more
Okay.
line that gives the actual numbers of the transfer amounts. Then you can see them, you can see them, because it's there, it's just not expressed in that manner. But here's, back to my person in charge and the person with the primary revenue source. In your environment, Don, and in your environment, a clear chain of command where you were before is so important for you to be able to do what you do every day. Because if your vice principal is answering to the school board and you're answering to the school board, and you get nominally different, just a little bit different messages, somewhere down the road, you start to diverge. And you end up with trouble because you end up incompatible with an individual that's under your roof. You're supposedly working together every day, but you end up diverging from the consistent message that you get with a one understood chain of command. And you know better than anybody, you lived it for a number of years. And so that's my concern. It's not that there's big, hairy things that come up and we have to fight over them. What I'm concerned with is just the little incremental changes that come over time. And over time, as we march down the road, 1 degree of difference puts you miles apart down the road. And that's where I am and here. I believe we can get super, very qualified people to work with our super, very qualified people today and in those roles. But again, if we don't have that ultimate buck stops here leader, and that's not us, that's not our job. Our job is to hire a city manager, give them direction, and get out of the way. We're not supposed to be dealing with day-to-day business. We're not supposed to be talking to a utilities manager about what he's doing on a given day. We're talking about the aggregate of what he does. So if we do our job correctly, we pick the right city manager, we pick a great city utility superintendent, we have a single line of command, we give them good direction, and we get out of the way. We're not supposed to be down in the weeds at all. That's my opinion. I hate to think that we start today and then we look back in 5 years and really have regrets over what we're doing.
Or we have regrets over what you have done, because we're the ones who pay.
I ain't gonna add what you said, the buck does stop the council. That's a small point, eh?
Well, I mean, ultimately it does, so we hired our city manager, but.
I know what you say.
But the important thing is get the right person in place and let them do their job. You may not have liked the prior city manager, I understand that.
And nothing to do with life.
I'm gonna tell you what, at the end of the day, go look at our financial statements. Go look at the team that he's built. Go look at the esprit de corps that we have in this community and the quality of people that run this community on the administrative side. I'm sorry, if you look at the results speak for themselves. As Keith said, he's seen them all, and there's none like Thomasville. So, personalities aside, we have a great net result from the prior setup.
I just want to point out, my thing here, my opinion on whether this happens or not is not based on personality. Lynn knows this, I've talked to others. Frankly, as a city person working for Marietta, for Cartersville, for running distribution, statewide distribution outfit, Electric Cities of Georgia, I wasn't necessarily that big on the two former city managers, and Lynn knows that. So this is not personal, it's not personal at all. This is simply based on, I mean, they're fine folks, but I just wouldn't make fun of them. This is not based on that. This is just simply based on my 40 years of doing this and seeing all of these cities from Oxford and Grantville to Marietta and Albany. And Albany was the last one, I guess, to consolidate. So that's
Albany.
one, Albany.
And speaking of bringing somebody in that's good, not that I wanna take any credit for anything, Chris, has been put in his position. Don left November 31st of 2016, so Chris stepped in, but at the time, it was appropriate, and Keith, I found you. It wasn't hard to find you, when you are one of the best in the state for doing what you've done, and you really looked out, like you said, for those linemen, all that was out there, and there was a lot of people in this town that did not want you here, didn't wanna give you a chance, but just like they don't wanna give us a chance, that's why we discussing this, having conversation, because whichever direction we go, I said over and over and over, I have one vote.
But Greg, the objection to Keith coming here was the process by which he was hired. You had council members that didn't even know you were talking to.
That's till you got to know me, now you object.
Now we object because you're leaving.
We're not as opposed as we were.
So the most salient point I'm hearing today is that, first of all, there seems to be a consensus that there was perhaps too much of a consolidation of power, so the council has moved towards making sure that we have a superintendent and a city manager. Great, wonderful, check. The next point is the line of command, and I think there's real division. I'm hearing it and I'm feeling it right around that table. But what I'm also hearing is that all of Georgia is moving towards a consolidated single line, or they have moved that way. We did that by consolidating the power in one person. Now we're trying to separate it into two. So why would we go one step backwards, separate it into two, and then separate it into two different lines of direct reports to the city council? That's just, what we're hearing from from 40 years of experience anyway.
And it needs to be made very clear to whoever comes in as city manager. That's why this is so crucial that this, I mean, if this is it, this is it. This is the way it's gonna be. But that person needs to know. And frankly, if I were a candidate for city manager under that scenario, I wouldn't take the job. That's just me.
Well, as it turns out, we've got 30 what appear to be very qualified applicants, and out of that, there's 8 that, of that 8, some on paper appear to be superstars who
Good.
are willing to take
Good.
positions.
Taking it under these circumstances.
Seen resumes?
According
Because
to,
that's not the way it's
according to our consultant, I'm just telling you what she said.
Have you seen resumes, David?
I have, yes.
Have you,
I've seen
Jay?
8 resumes.
Jay?
Have you seen resumes?
I'll have it come.
Have you seen resumes?
You'll see them at the meeting. We tried our best, Jay, to get her to meet with us
Well, why are
today,
you
but
micromanaging
there
this
was a
process
conflict.
too, David?
What's that now?
Why are you micromanaging
You
that
call
process?
micromanaging
Other
the
council
choice, wait a
members-
minute, the choice for a city manager, you call it micromanaging?
You- seriously?
That'll be the most important decision we'll make.
So why doesn't Jay know?
He chose, I guess he chose not to go. I asked, only 2 of us can go. Terry, did I invite you? Okay, and we asked her to put it on the fast track. Please come Wednesday, either
Micromanaging.
us or,
Let's get it back on track.
well, I mean, that wasn't.
Don't get into that. You was elected to serve
But
by
so-
the people in the
but-
community, not by a small group of people.
I mean, I thought that was good.
Does
to
that
do.
city manager think that they're gonna have the person directing, I mean, did the consultant give the chain of command? Or was that clear, Kay, of what they were?
We'll be interviewing these people.
Right.
The council will be interviewing each person that's gonna be interviewed. We'll do it as a group, and we'll do it individually. And so that person, that will be brought to their attention as a group, because it's unfair if they don't know.
Right, no,
And I
absolutely.
even
So it
tried to
seems
get
to
that
me-
out there even before, when these people were gonna be applying, for this. It's unfortunate that we've had a lot of distractions, and we haven't accomplished much of anything, and it's into the fixing to be the 9th month. And so, with the distractions that we're having, we're not accomplishing anything, and making it complicated for other people that wanna come to Thomasville and work, to come and work. So, even with this utilities meeting here, I wish we'd have been in the auditorium, and I would have had a lot of people that's concerned about what's gonna happen moving forward, and not just a small group. So it's,
Well, don't you have to resolve this question before you interview somebody? You've gotta resolve it as a council. It's gotta be resolved. You can't leave it open before you talk to somebody.
Are we getting advice from Mr. Bass?
Well, you need-
Get advice from the city manager where they're coming from? If they make recommendations that, or they would like to see it done that way, we can get a consensus from a number of people. We don't have to just, I like Keith, Mr. Bass, but I don't mean I have to just take his advice on everything he say.
But can't you, how can you hire somebody before you make that decision? That's a part of this decision
An
process.
interview is not a hire.
Pardon?
An interview is not a hire. You're preparing to hire someone.
Yes.
So you get advice from that person. That means you hired them yet. So we will know that before then.
But you're ruling out candidates who don't know what the criteria is. It's
I don't think
ridiculous.
You should
That's
talk
why
to
they
anybody
apply.
You
until
can't- you
got
can't do
this
that.
That's
set.
why they applied, you know. I'm sorry, you were saying something, sir? I didn't mean to cut
I
you.
don't think you answered Austin's question.
What was the question?
The question was, did the consulting group let the candidates know that the consideration was being determined right now of how the superintendent would report, either to the city manager or to the council?
I can't tell you what that consultant told us folks, cause I don't.
There's
have
no
that.
discussion with them about that.
Well,
That's a
I'm
huge
sure it
deal.
was. You wanna speak?
Right, I provided the Renee Narlock with a copy of the retreat report. In April, this said we would have 2 positions, utility superintendent and city manager, wherein the utility superintendent will report to the city manager. During the course of her advertising, we said, as a matter of full disclosure, we said, this is what was discussed at the retreat, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit. The practice has been to have one person with oversight for this, and that the city manager have responsibility for a variety of functions, fire chief, police chief, et cetera, But we said that there is a difference in the charter, but we made it clear that our practice for the last 24 years or whatever has been, one person at the head of at the food chain, you know, so to speak, but we did say that there would be a utility superintendent. So it's on her, Renee Narlock's, if you go to Narlock and Associates, you can take a look at that, as far as recruitment.
But the implication is it'll be reporting through the city manager based on the council retreat. That's what the assumption was.
But we did have kind of a declarative statement saying that this is what was discussed and affirmed at the council meeting. And after the July 23rd meeting, there was discussion that there was going to be a change. So Renee was made aware of that, so that whether I haven't checked to see if she's changed the verbiage in there, but we based it on, you know, the original information from April, and then, you know, from here. So I think in terms of recruitment, she's been able to verbally tell people that there are two positions. Practice would assume that it may report to the city manager, but there may be some deliberation about that.
Didn't the council as a whole affirm what the UGA facilitator had written in his report?
That was done as of April, but as of July 23rd, there was discussion to the contrary.
And Mr. Hofstadler doesn't believe that?
Don't believe what?
That
I was
that
there,
was
I was there at the
confirmed.
retreat, I came out of there saying that it wasn't confirmed, that it would be two separate positions. And the main consensus coming out of there, Keith, in spite of what you may remember, is that there was the number one concern for combining those powers was too much power in one set of hands. That was unanimous.
Well, with all respect, I think you have a difficulty understanding.
Well,
I have difficulty, well, Mr. Eugen,
Understanding,
they're open to the public.
understanding the written word and the spoken word.
I'm not sure what he wrote. I was there, I saw the results. And any of those are open to the public, you're welcome to attend and
I can
encouraged to
clarify
attend.
that for you. I have it with me, the implementation process was to start a process for hiring a city manager. And one of the comments during the meeting was, can I hire an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator without hiring a head coach? Begin a charter review, create the appropriate organizational chart. The city manager and utility superintendent will be two different people. Utility superintendent will report to the city manager. The current charter would have to be amended to reflect that the utility superintendent will report to the city manager. The mayor, council, and the new city manager will establish performance management goals and objectives for the new city manager to meet, which will tie into bonuses, etc. So those were, when we completed it, those were our next steps to implementation, as written by the UGA facilitator with up to, I think, we had 13 or 14 people there. So,
And I think
that's
that's,
it.
I think that's what, I think you get the offensive defense coordinator, I'll probably guess that's probably my comment.
I think that might be.
Coach Mike, that would be my comment.
Quoted Keith Bass.
My thing is.
Which was a good comment.
My thing is, if 47 of the 52 communities are doing that, or we're doing, I just don't understand how we trying to do something different.
Amen.
After this McDonald's comment, we're gonna move to the next item.
Okay. Well, last night, and I've had my discussions with you all about this, and going back to the UGA report, you know, as you mentioned a couple nights ago, I've had my 30 years, there's Lynn 29, Nate 40, a lot of us have a lot of time invested in this and worked under two separate governments. I have said to, I know at least you personally and a couple of people, the decision to separate is not about, I think, expertise, it was about personality, and you just said deliverance of services. The right person for this job will be able to support 5 council members separately and individually, so that you all can be successful. If that wasn't the case before, and I've said before on my HR side, I can't tell you what to do with the city manager because I reported to that person. But I did say that benchmarks, performance measures should be put in place for anybody, because they were not. They were assumed manage the budget, manage the people, and that should be something that each council member should be responsible for having input on, whether it's transfers and everything else. So my concern with separating is that you do have, and I mentioned in my email last night, you're marrying 2 women and asking them to get along at the same time. That's difficult. I'm not gonna try that, but you know, but that's difficult. If you have the right person in place, that person can do that, and you can all work as cohesively to get that job done. Part of his personality, part of his expertise. I understand your frustrations with the previous city manager, where you feel like he did not provide each of you with an equitable amount or comparable amount of service. I understand that, but again, going back to those benchmarks, one of the benchmarks that you will need to have for a city manager is that that will be executed. And then you all do have the power and the ability to make that happen. So I wanted to make that clear because at the outset, when Tom Berry came back in 1994 and we consolidated, the council should have made an adjustment in the charter to reflect our practice. We did not. That's why right now we can say the charter says when it's convenient or when it's necessary, but it does need to be looked at. That gentleman's agreement is like a prenup. Oh, we don't need it now until we disagree. And I'll say it, that was a failure on the council's part not to do it because again, now we're getting, looks like it's a divorce and we should have had a prenup and that would help us out with that. So relative to the structure that Todd's been in, Terry's been in, there is one person at top, there's a superintendent, principal, whatever the case may be. That works well with us. With the right person, expertise, and personality, you can get that. Thomasville deserves that. And I think the staff has demonstrated, even with Keith coming here, where we're all a bit cross-eyed and concerned when he got here, and we realized within the first 5 days that this is gonna work out well for us because he can see, he can give us some guidance and direction. He's done an expert job with that. I hate to lose him with that because he's really brought some good ideas to the table, for us. We lucked up with that one, with that. Like I said, we were a little bit cross-eyed and crazy when he first was hired because we thought, what is this going to be? But it's worked out to our advantage. But again, it depends on the expertise and in spite of what he says about his personality, his straightforwardness and directness and ability to see through the weeds has been an advantage to us. So you do get kudos on that. But again, with the city manager position, one person, utility superintendent, you all find the right person and set those benchmarks and parameters.
Thank you, but I'm trying to get credit, Kate. I say this, and like you said, things might not start out right, but as time goes on, things get better. That's what happened with Keith. Well, years ago, I tried to get us as a council at the time, even though I was probably I was in the minority. I tried to get us to correct that charter back then. I sent emails out, I even sent certified letters, emails back and forth with the press. As far as, it was questioned, what was I trying to do? Wasn't trying to do anything but what was right. If we can do this, y'all have the votes to do it. I can't stop it. All I was trying to do was what's right. Okay, when it's not done in the proper time, you know what changes things? Elections. People get upset and they get out and vote, and council members that serve on the council that's not doing what the majority of the people in this community want that vote, it'll change it.
So I think that people want change, I think you're right, you all were elected on change. But now that you're in the room and you understand how you can execute that change and still keep it best practice, I think you need to keep an open mind with that. That's what I'm asking.
I've always
The
done
changes
that.
you can have, you can diversify that power between a superintendent and a city manager. But now that you understand the best practices in Georgia are moving away from two individuals reporting directly to city council, is that still the right change to be considered? You still diversify the power.
Right now, that seems like we need to go take a look at the charter. Get with Tim, if there's change that we made in the charter, we need to go and revise it. That way, then we have some guidance there. So I think that could be the number one priority right there. Get the charter, go to the city manager, and go from there.
Well, you gotta get the city manager first.
That's what I'm saying.
Mr. Mayor.
I'd like to say something. I don't think you're gonna be able to move forward until you acknowledge that every standard that you measure success by, the model that you had exceeded all of the expectations. If you needed to tweak it or to make some adjustments, all of that stuff is within your power. The problem is you're stuck on trying to say you're doing away with something because it didn't work when all the results say it does work. If you have something particular that you're trying to achieve, you need to state it. Put all the cards on the table and say exactly what it is that you want and why you're doing it. Elections have consequences. With that come the power and the authority. You had the power and authority to fire the city manager. That didn't make him a bad city manager. His performance was what it was. The records speak for themselves. if you wanna go in a new direction, then you need to state the direction that you wanna go in and the reason why, and not use veiled threats and reasons to do something that's not consistent with what you're saying, because the people, and we're following the facts. Since January, all our employees have been doing was, tell us what direction you wanna go in, tell us what you want, tell us how you wanna do it, and we'll help you get there. And then all we get is sleight of hand and misdirection. You're not gonna move forward, you're gonna always be stuck in the ditch that you're in until you be frank and honest about what it is you're trying to do, and then do it and say, I did it because I wanted to.
I just wanna say, and I'm hesitant to do this, but I'm gonna say it. I came here in 1989, and when I came here, we were 2 organizations. And very early on, I started going to council meetings, taking minutes. So I've seen council meetings nearly my entire career here. In the early days when I came here, we had a utility superintendent and a city manager who reported to the council. We were not one team. We were not one team. There was bitterness and jealousy between the 2 organizations, and it was not good for our community. It was not good for our customers. It didn't provide a good environment for us to serve our customers. And what we've seen happen over time with the combination of those 2 positions is the culture changed. And we all became a team, and we all began serving the community together. That is what I don't wanna see us lose. That's what we're here for. We're here to serve our community. And no matter where we end up, that's the culture of us serving together as a team and doing the best we can for this community needs to remain in place. And I would just ask you to please keep that in mind, because we worked really hard to change that culture. And I know that's what you want too. I know you want us to serve the community well. And again, I would just ask, keep that in mind as we move forward.
Thank you. I gotta keep moving on to the next slide, please. I'm sorry, you got, Mr. Marvin, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when all this first started, separation of utilities and city manager, and discussion with Keith to become the utilities superintendent, I was like, well, let's see how this works. Let's see how this works. Here's a trial run on having a utilities superintendent and a city manager. So after watching it for what, last 3 or 4 months? 5 months?
Almost 6.
5 months? I think it's worked out pretty good. You know, that Keith has taken some of that pressure off of the city manager who was having to control or run all of this. So now some of that, and I think when you came, you told us that you could not work unless you reported to the city manager. And, I think that's worked out good, and I just want to tell you, thank you for all that you've done for the last 5 months and the next month that you're gonna do. I've learned a lot just from your part of it.
And to put folks at ease, it was also in my contract that I didn't have the power to hire and fire. Kind of should have put some, so the next is the item on the agenda, list of items of significance. Again, I'm not here really to discuss these, to problem solve today. It's just these are issues that y'all are gonna have to deal with going forward. Number 1 on the list is separation. I think we beat that to death for today. Next is utility rates. And I don't know, we talked earlier, the water rates, we're catching up. We've had some better sales. Wastewater, we're still behind as far as the revenue. There was a 3 or 4% rate increase that was proposed in last year's budget, so the budget was passed initially with that rate increase. So that's part of the reason why we're behind on the net income. So that's something, again, that y'all really need to look at, is what is your cost of providing that? It costs more to provide wastewater, sewer, than it does water, and that's why, for instance, in Marietta, where I live, my sewer rate's twice what my water rate is, and that's not uncommon. So again, that's something you need to look at. On the electric side, we are catching up. We need to hope for a hot September. And a cold November and December. We're gonna be okay on the electric side. We're gonna talk about a couple of riders, the power cost adjustment and environmental rider. We're gonna talk about that in just a minute. Just, again, everybody needs to be aware that people may complain about residential rates, but the residential rates from the cost of service are not breaking even. So, and that's not uncommon with the city at all. It's just something that you point that out just to make sure that folks are aware of it. And so that's one thing. The other thing is, again, going forward with Vogel and so forth, it's really important that we grow the electric system. That is very important from an economic development standpoint, from a job standpoint, but also from a selling power standpoint. So that's very, very important. Plant Vogel, I'm sure some of y'all, at least, probably most of you, heard a little bit about what's going on with Vogel. I did talk to the MEAG's president and CEO the other day. I do believe that project will go forward. I would be shocked if it gets canceled. The good news is for the city of Thomasville is our wholesale cost projections from MEAG from now, 2018 through 2028, are fairly flat. So that means our wholesale cost from them is gonna be pretty stable for the next 10 years. Now, we do acquire in 2023, I think, we get about 5.8 megawatts of Vogel. But that also depends on Vogel's schedule. So if, if Vogel's pushed back another year or whatever, so then that's gonna push all that back. My whole point is with Vogel, it would do the watch. As I told Ken earlier, that's just something you need to, we got a contract, MEAG signed that, their portion of Vogel to offload that for most participants for 20 years. And so we're okay, again, assuming everything with Jackson Electric Authority gets worked out, and MEAG feels like it is. MEAG.
I was gonna say, how is Jacksonville's a key player in that?
Well, again, I talked to Jim about that, and Reed, I've been following that. I was following that even before, in retirement. So I've been really watching Vogel to see what's gonna happen. They did cancel the plants in South Carolina, that plant over there, BC Summer, but that's a whole different matter. The way they approached that, the way they financed it, MEAG as a public power entity did some very smart things with the Build America bonds to refinance some debt and things like that. So MEAG also had the contract with JEA upheld in Georgia court, which is what they would typically do. Like they do that with us, with the city. They get that, they'll have a participant file a case and get it tested and get a ruling on it from a judge. And that contract has been upheld by the Georgia court. And MEAG truly, firmly believes that that is an ironclad contract. I hope they can come to terms with Jacksonville. I do believe a lot of it is political posturing on their part. You had a group down there who wanted to sell JEA. Now you've got a state legislator down there who wants them investigated for mismanagement. So I think a lot of that, and the fellow who wrote the letter, the complaint, is an interim president, or whatever they call him, CEO at JEA. And we know you can't put any confidence in the interim person.
Hey.
Some you can, some you can't.
So the big.
We'll discuss it later.
I do think that, the news so far from Vogel is not bad. I wouldn't say it's good, I just said it's not bad.
All things considered.
All things considered.
I don't know this as a fact, but I think Thomasville has had a representative at MEAG for years. Is that right?
It's been several years now. Roland Clayton, if y'all remember him, was the very first MEAG board chairman when MEAG was created.
And we don't have a representative.
And Tom Berry was on the board for a number of years, but you haven't had one. there was a discussion this year about running somebody, and I certainly encourage y'all to have somebody on the MEAG board. The difficulty with MEAG, getting somebody elected, it's very hard to beat an incumbent. It's just very hard.
But you have
If
to
the
try.
If the cities are happy, well, and, you know, it's been tried, and it has been done. And I know that for a fact, it's been done, but it took a while to do it. But the easiest path is to look for a vacancy if somebody's retiring from the board. That's the easiest path, and then work it. I mean, I had a list already prepared, cause we initially had word that one of the board members was gonna come off. Then apparently he changed his mind and so forth, but, I mean, it's like politicking. I mean, you gotta make the calls, you gotta find out who the voting delegates are, you got to get the mayors involved and all that stuff, so all that said, I would definitely encourage y'all to have somebody on the MEAG board, very important.
If it's that difficult to become a member of that board, and Tom was Steve Sykes a member?
No, he was on the gas
Okay, said
authority
that.
board.
He was on what?
The gas authority. There's also a municipal gas authority, which was started several years after MEAG was formed, and Steve was on that board. In fact, maybe he's still on that board, I'm not sure.
I was told that he could have been on a committee.
Yeah, he might
A
be.
distribution committee, and I forgot what the other one was.
Marky?
But it ain't like
Marky.
politicking, the answer, Keith, to add to what Keith said, it ain't like politicking getting on that board. I seen it firsthand for a few years. It's politics.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Tom was able to make it for many years.
Well, a lot of us worked for him, because I was in the city when he was elected, so, yeah, I mean, there was.
Keith, I guess what I worry about is, and again, this is no one's fault, but, you know, as I understand it, we've offloaded about 75% of what we're supposed to get to Vogel to JEA. And they're screaming, they wanna get out, they may or may not be able to get out. And they may be able to reduce that amount, there may be a lot of things, but I guess the worry is, it's very easy to foresee a set of circumstances where we have a lot of power we can't overload, and I can see the path, like, hey, we gotta do something, this is gonna lead to property taxes down the road, there's like, you know, and it's no one's fault, but I guess I worry more about, I would like to see the council aware of that and perhaps doing some type of contingency or thinking that that could happen, but hopefully it wouldn't happen.
Good point.
Well,
Excellent point.
some of the things we'll bring forth for council consideration later on, once we determine what's gonna happen with Vogel 3 and 4, is we've got around 25 megawatts of capacity in SEPA, which is hydro, and it's pretty expensive power, even though it's considered green.